My name is Srinivas Krishna. I'm a director, and I have been a director of films for the past 20 years. As a director, I do a number of things, but the core of the job is, once I've been hired to direct a show, a TV episode or a movie, whatever the case may be, the core of my job is to read the script and interpret it in such a way that allows me to stage the action and shoot it, to supervise that whole process creatively, and to keep that process of production on time and on budget, and to supervise then the post-production of the shot footage, which means to supervise the editing, the sound, until there is a finished cut or edit of the show that accurately reflects the script that was delivered to me to direct. Over the past 20 years, I've worked on many different kinds of projects, feature films that I've written as well as directed, TV shows, episodes of TV series, short films, dance films, films that are made for live, public display in video installations, public art installations. Each brings a different kind of reward, challenge and reward, and that's part of what makes the whole job interesting. Every job is unique because it really depends on the people you're working with and the very unique challenges of every film. My first film, Masala, was shot in Toronto. It involved a cast of about 100 people. Really, it was a big film. Several locations, some 50-odd locations, shot over 7 weeks. And because it was my first film, it was a pretty modest budget, so essentially we were promising a Cadillac for the price of a Honda, if I can put it that way. It was a tremendously enjoyable film to make. The hours when you're a director and when you're working are insane. 16-hour days or more when you're in production and in pre-production. During pre-production, you're setting up everything that you need to do during production. That means you're deciding on your locations, you're deciding on your costumes, you're deciding on who these characters are and all the things that are going to go into making this show. Where are you going to put your camera when you get to a location? How are you going to light it? The equipment that you'll need. And if you have special effects, how are you going to pull those special effects off? And once you've made all those decisions with all the people that you're working with, you have a technical survey of your locations and you kind of go over everything with everybody. And you do this a couple of days before you shoot. And if you have some time and if your actors are available, you rehearse with them. And then you go on location or into the studio, you set up your camera and you start shooting. Typically, a shooting day is a 12 or 13-hour day, including lunch. And if you're working on a show that is a guild or union show, then there's certain rules that come in. Like after 12 or 13 hours, you go into overtime. From when you stop a working day to when you start the next working day, there has to be a minimum turnaround of 10 or 12 hours. And on it goes. And if that turnaround is less, then there's penalties and so on. But independent films, often they go very late, people get very little sleep, and it's really a work of passion. If you don't love it, don't do it, because you're going to burn out so quickly. I started directing when I was very young. I had a theater company with 3 other people. It was called Theatre de Pointe, and it was a theater collective, and we put on shows at the Theatre Centre in Toronto. That was a long time ago, when I was just out of high school. That's how I started directing and acting and putting on shows. Subsequent to that, after doing my undergraduate degree in art and art history, I went to Temple University where I took an MFA in film, specifically cinematography, where I learned how to shoot. For me, I wanted to make films after doing theater, I realized, but for me, and I tried to make films, but it was a disaster, and mainly because I didn't know anything about the technology. And in those days, we didn't really have video. You know, we only, really, if you wanted to make films, you had to deal with movie cameras, with the lab, and you never know what you got until you got it back from the lab. So it was a process, and it wasn't an easy one. So for me, what I really needed to learn, what I wanted to learn, was that technology and mastering that technology, and learning how to use it, and be confident with it. And that's what I learned when I was in school. That helped me a lot. When I started making films, the technology was really different. We used movie cameras, we used editing machines, standing editing machines like Moviolas or Steenbecks, flatbed editing tables. The whole process was mechanical and chemical. You know, when you took it to the lab, it was put through a bath and processed. And cameras are really like clocks, you know, they're all mechanically put together. Today, the technology is entirely different, and over the course of my career, I've witnessed the change from my first films that we made on, feature films that we made on Steenbecks and Moviolas, to Avids, and then, you know, and Avids when they came out were big machines, you know, the digital editing machines, to now Final Cut Pro on a little MacBook. You know, it's what we knew was coming, but when it came so fast and so effectively that it's changed how we make films. Technology is developing so quickly, and so quickly does it become redundant, that what I'm finding, and I'm sure most people who are working are finding, is that the particular technology is not as critical as the attitude that you have to be adaptable. The working life of a director is marked by periods of intense activity when you're working, and then the time between jobs, when in fact you have nothing to do, or you're developing other projects, or it's a time that's much more loose. And it goes like that. Periods of intense activity where you're completely inaccessible to everybody in your family and in your friends. And then periods when you have time, and suddenly you're on the phone talking to people, trying to catch up. And that's sort of the pattern of the job, and of your life if you do this job. Directing, film directing, would appeal to people who like to have an effect on other people. You have to want to move audiences or big groups of people. You'll have to want to speak to big groups of people if you want to get into this business. It also appeals to people who are very comfortable with delayed gratification. From the time you get a script or develop a script to the time when your film is in the theaters or on TV or on video is a few years. You're never, or rarely are you ever sitting in a room watching your movie with other people. You might do that a few times, but then it has a life of its own. Directors come to this job from many different walks of life. So there's no given path to it. I'd say if this is something that you're interested in pursuing, and you're in high school, it would be a good thing to get involved in theater, get comfortable working with other people, developing those skills, collaboration, communication, imagination, you know, putting on a show. I also think a really good thing to do would be to draw, to understanding how a page, an empty page or an empty canvas, an empty frame works, how you can fill it, and to understand how images tell stories and how they communicate. I'd say the thing that I know now that I didn't know when I started in this job was how much you have to sell. You know, big part of the job is sales, is pitching, persuading other people to get behind the thing you want to do. And you never know how much you have to do that until you get into it, but that's the kind of unspoken part of the job. Write a script, or become best friends with someone who can write a script. Because I think more than anything else, having a good script is what's going to get you your first job.